With the European Commission and Romania now also joining the list of countries suspending funds to UNRWA and the latest concerning reports by the New York Times, we're now joined in studio by entrepreneur, investor, and member of the World Jewish Congress, Terry Newman. Terry, great having you here today. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
So really, I want to start with the New York Times report. New details have been revealed today, joining the latest revelations from the last couple of days of what its workers have done during October 7 massacre. What's the latest we know?
Well, I mean, let's start with just realizing how concerning this is. You know, members of UNRWA were involved in the massacre of the 7th of October. But we're also seeing as well, they weren't just involved in the massacre itself, they were involved in actually holding the hostages, in moving the hostages from an UNRWA building to another UNRWA building. We've even got stories from hostages who have been freed saying they were fed UNRWA food in UNRWA buildings. So this is not a UN organization. UNRWA, despite its name, is a Palestinian organization run by Palestinians for the purposes of promoting the Palestinian cause. And, you know, I think if you realize that the entire world has one refugee agency, other than one specific group of people, and I'm sure you can guess who they are, the Palestinian people, this has to stop. I mean, you know, the only organization that deals with refugees that has more refugees today than it had when it was set up is UNRWA. The only organization in the world that can create refugees, and I'll say that word again, create refugees, and pass it from generation to generation is
UNRWA. That's the answer.
And so therefore, you know, as the United Nations, as other, you mentioned Romania just before, but if you look at the countries that have said, hang on a second, what's going on here, we can see that these are the countries who democracy, who freedom and other important values of the Western world are central to their outlook.
But I want to ask you, Terry, Israel has been calling to defund UNRWA for years by now. No one's listening, and now the countries are waking up. Is it because they really didn't know, or did they know but they can't ignore it anymore?
That's an excellent question, and I think the answer to that is as follows. Listen, there is a requirement for Palestinian people as part of developing countries to get aid, to get development aid. There are many other countries in the world where the UN provides development aid, where other countries, wealthier countries, provide development aid. So Gaza and the West Bank are examples of where that should be done, but they should be done as humanitarian organizations that give humanitarian aid rather than refugee-creating mechanisms. And if I may say, you know, this is part of the debasing of the international organizations that were set up after World War II to protect human rights, to protect refugees. I can give you two other examples. I spoke a couple of years ago in the UN Council for Human Rights. When Iran and North Korea are members of it, how can that be how can that be a serious organization for human rights? It's the debasing of the organization. Another example from last week, you know, the International Court of Justice. South Africa, a country that had just hosted the Sudanese warlord, Emedeti, who had carried out a real genocide. I've been to Darfur, right? Carried out a real genocide, was welcomed there with a red carpet, and they are taking Israel to court over genocide.
You can't compare it. And you know, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, not necessarily a friend of Israel during this war, right? He's calling to maintain the aid because Gazan civilians need this aid. How do you see a way to continue with UNRWA, or maybe not, to help those Palestinians, but not the way it's happening right now?
So I think UNRWA needs to be scrapped. I think a humanitarian development organization should be set up. Those funds should be run by Western countries, by Abraham countries, those who've signed on the Abraham Accords, and that money should go to the Palestinian people. The current situation where, in effect, we are saying to Hamas, you take all your funds and you use it to build terror tunnels and attack Israel, whilst we use our funds in order to look after your population, has to end. It's bad for the Palestinians, it's bad for Israel, and it's bad for the world.
Definitely, and I think we should be happy the world is waking up right now. Thank you so much, Terry, for joining us today, and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.